Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Meeting House Church. We're so glad you're here joining us today online. And my name is Patrick Smalley, and I'm the Digital Ministry Manager here at Meeting House Church. If this is your first time joining us, I'd like to extend a special welcome to you. Check out the description below to find helpful links for you to get the most out of today's service. And if you'd like to get more connected in our community, an easy first step is by texting ConnectMC to 55498. Now, whether this is your first time or your 100th time joining us online, we'd love to hear from you. In the bottom of your screen, there's been a QR code, and maybe you couldn't contain your curiosity and you've already scanned it with your phone. This QR code is going to take you to a survey. We want to better understand those of you joining us online each week, your needs, your wants, your dreams for connecting digitally with Meeting House Church. Now, maybe you live across the country. Maybe you're just at your cabin this weekend, or maybe you woke up late and you didn't feel like getting ready today. That's cool too. Whatever your story, we're glad that you joined us today, and we'd love to hear from you. So take 5 minutes today and fill out the survey. It's going to help us out a ton as we look to launch new programs this fall. Now, if QR codes aren't your thing, there's a link available in today's description on YouTube. Or if you need a minute to scan the code, feel free to pause here and give yourself a little more time. Now, as we're getting ready to start this morning, get comfortable and feel free to send a message in the chat. And from all of us here at Meeting House Church, welcome.
Good morning, Meeting House Church. It is good to see everybody in here. This is really phenomenal. I'm really excited to see you. Welcome everyone joining in online. My name is Andrew Jia. I'm one of the ministers here at church. On this Sunday morning, we are going to ease in, as we always do, and just talk to some folks around us. All right, so make sure you guys mix and mingle and talk to folks maybe you don't possibly know. Folks at home, do the same thing. Maybe talk to someone in the room with you. Maybe even send a text, send a good morning to someone. But our questions for this morning, our kind of intro questions, our theme today is faith and equality. The first one is, what does equality mean to you? And how does your faith influence this meaning? Just FYI, these are really easy like softballs this morning for intro questions. Question number 2, are there certain people you favor or have biases against? What factors into these judgments? Now, just FYI, we're naming these things. There's no shaming that is going on. It's just the idea that like we all have these biases. And it's just important to name them and maybe understand them, where we get them from, so that we can do something about them. So this is how we're easing into this morning. It is lovely to be here with all of you. Good morning. We'll reconvene in a few minutes.
Well, good morning, everyone. And hi again, I'm Sarah, one of the ministers here at Meeting House, and really glad to be with you this morning. This morning, as we gather together, we're centering around the theme of faith and equality. And we've been going through the book of James this summer and talking about what he wrote in his letter. And I wanted to actually start by reading the letter because, sometimes you can't make this stuff up. It's actually in the Bible. So just so you know, here it goes. This is from James chapter 2. My dear siblings, your faith in our glorious Savior must not allow favoritism. Suppose someone should come into your assembly and they're obviously rich. And at the same time, another person who's obviously poor comes in. Suppose you take notice of this really rich person and you say, here's this really great seat. You should totally sit here. And then to the other who is poor, you say, can you just sit in the back and disappear? Haven't you in your heart discriminated against them? Haven't you set yourself up like judges who make corrupt decisions? Listen, God chose those who are poor to be rich in faith, and they are heirs to the kingdom that was promised to those who love God. Yet you treated poor people shamefully. Isn't it the rich who are exploiting you? Aren't they the ones who haul you into the courts and who come against the name of Jesus by which you've been called? You're acting rightly, though, if you fulfill the scriptures where it says, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you show favoritism, you commit sin. And then the law convicts you. And here's the thing with the law. Everyone is guilty unless they keep every single part. So you can't say no adultery. I don't do that. I'm just fine. And no killing. But if you actually do commit adultery, the thing is, it's the same as if you commit murder because either way, you've broken the law. So talk and behave instead as like people who are judged by freedom. Because judgment without mercy will be the lot of those who are not merciful. Because the truth is that mercy triumphs over judgment. So that's from the text of James, a very nice, docile, non-opinionated letter. And we wanted to today then talk about some of what he's bringing up, about the ways in which so often as humans, we actually do judge and decide which humans matter more than others. And our faith instead invites us to treat each other with the mercy and kindness and love where all of us are equal. So today, we just invite you to sit with that and think about how might God be inviting even in your life to keep expanding the table and to keep noticing how we treat one another. And so as we start off together today, we're going to sing a song called Welcome Table. And you'll know if you received a worship guide, if you're with us online, there's a link to it. On your tables, there's also a black circle with an image. You can find the worship guide there as well. And just ask you to take a look at that. Consider some of the invitations as we sing this first song.
I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. Sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna feast on milk and honey. Oh, I'm God's children gonna sit together. Oh, God's children gonna sit together one of these days. Oh, God's children gonna sit together. Oh, God's children gonna sit together one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. Oh, sit at the welcome table one of these days. Oh, sit at the welcome table one of these days.
Thanks for that, Jane. Is Jane here? Jane's in Colorado. So we're going to move to God's garden. So as we do that, I will pretend that I am almost as cool as Jane. If you are a younger human, would you come up here? Because we're going to go to God's garden. If you're like walkable human up through 5th grade, I think. Right? Doot, 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 doot. Hi, everybody. Hi, Fionas. Hi. Has anyone heard this song called God's Garden before? I have heard it. Hi. Do 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 do. So what happens is at this point, the younger humans in our midst are going to go, and God's garden is all about a space. Hi. Where we get to remember that God made all of us and that it was good, and we get to have some fun and learn and be together. So should we sing this song? What do you think? Should we sing the God's Garden song? Yes. Okay. Are you ready? You all better lead the singing part, though. Go ahead. Ready?
Come, oh come to the garden. Gather round, come without fear. Known by name, here in God's garden. All are welcome.
Sing it.
Come to the garden. Gather round, come without fear. Known by name, here in God's garden. All are welcome.
Yay! Yay! We did it. What do you think? Should we go? Okay, so we're going to do, yes. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, everybody. We're going to say goodbye, church, and then we're going to say have fun, kids. Okay? Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Now what do we respond? Okay, have a lot of fun. Some humans preschool go that way with Colleen, and the elementary go to the back with Kenzie and the crutches. And now I will transition us very gracefully. That first song about the table, my favorite part was, I'm going to tell God how you treat me one of these days. But indeed, the table is a center image in the Christian faith, and the table is supposed to be a place for all of us. So as you noted in our the worship guide, and if you've taken a look at that, there's a question inviting you to consider a place or a table or an experience you've had where it's felt like that, where you've known that you were welcome, and it was just a really incredible, moving, memorable time. I want you to call that to mind. And what we'll actually do in this space is I'm going to invite you to turn to a neighbor and to introduce yourself. If you're willing to share about a time or a table, great. If you are in a moment where you're thinking about it, you're not so sure you want to share, you can say pass. And if you're with us online, we'd love for you to also just write in the chat and let us know an experience of the table that you've had as well. And so we'll just spend a few minutes doing that as a way for us to think about what does it mean that God opens up this kind of welcome table for all of us. Okay? So turn to each other.
Ditto. Yeah.
Kind of go under.
Something light.
Okay, take another 30 seconds and we'll come back together.
trip left them cold. I wear the black in mourning for the lives that could have been. Each week we lose 100 young men. I wear it for the 1,000 who have died, believing that the Lord was on their side. I wear it for another 100,000 who have died, believing that we all were on their side. Take it away, Al. I love to wear a rainbow every day and tell the world that everything's gonna be okay. But I'll try to carry on a little darkness on my back till things are brighter. I'm the man in black.
Thank you. I didn't get the color memo. But my black outfit was not ironed. No, so anyway, the first time I actually heard this song was Andy and I were on a road trip, and Andy is obsessed with Johnny Cash. And we were listening along, and this song came on, and I was like, you mean there's a reason he wore black? And Andy's like, yeah, everybody knows this. I was like, well, now I do. So, a really powerful song about how we show up in the world and what it means to actually care for one another. Today we are coming into the space of community reflection, which we've been doing once a month, and it's been just so lovely being able to hear from one another in this space. I was thinking about it, and all of a sudden something clicked in my mind that there are a couple people that, knowing a little bit about who they are and also what they're passionate about, made me think about this theme of faith and equality. So I asked, and they kindly said yes, to Rick and Paige, and wondered if they would be willing to have a conversation. So I'll invite Rick and Paige to come up, and we're going to talk a little bit about this theme and about their stories. Hi. Can we welcome them with a bravery round of applause? Hi. Come on over.
Okay.
Hi. So hi. Go a little bit that way, if you would. You're good. There.
Perfect.
Okay, good. So first of all, would you two share just your names and then a little bit of how you got connected with the church?
So my name is Rick, and I'm connected to the church largely through Paige, who grew up here. And we had been church shopping for a few years and came back and loved everything that was going on, and now we're quite involved.
And I'm Paige. I grew up at the church. My parents are here. Well, shout out. I went here through youth group, and in my confirmation year, I started going to another church called Solomon's Porch, and a couple of those folks are here. Little shout out, Solomon's Porch. And when I was going through confirmation, I had a lot of just questions, not about God, but more about church. And I had also been going to a really conservative camp as a kid, and I just was very confused. So I decided to take a break from this community and go to Solomon's Porch, which I did for about 10 years. And then right before Rick and I met, I started coming back for holidays and with my family, of course. And then when we were looking at churches, we really liked this place because Rick didn't grow up in the church and I did. And I think it's a nice, there's elements that work really well for both of us having really different backgrounds.
Thanks for sharing. I'm glad you're here. So could you two share a little bit about, both personally and professionally, some of what you are really passionate about as it connects with our theme for today?
Yeah, so I'm, some people might know I'm a chef. I've been working in kitchens for a couple decades. So I'm in the business of making food for people and welcoming people and creating positive experiences and good experiences around food and beverage. I think that's about me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we also run an Airbnb in our home. So that's something that we both do together. And that's an important part of being a hospitable space for people. My background is more, in terms of hospitality, is in beer and writing. I've been writing about beer for about 10 years next month. And getting into that and learning about beer and understanding the history of beer, knowing that a lot of women were brewers but don't get any credit for that today, knowing that there's a rising number of people of color in brewing spaces is really important to me. And now I don't write so much for myself as much, but I do some freelance work about beer and food. And as I do that work, I'm really cognizant of who my sources are, making sure they don't all look the same, making sure they have different perspectives on things. So that's important to me also.
Thanks for it. So this is part of exactly when I was thinking about this topic and knowing for both of you in different ways, your passion around food and hospitality and thinking about like the table and welcome, like literally this is the rhythm of your lives. So there are a couple different things you had shared about as we were talking coming into today. You know, the one is, Paige, you were talking a little bit about a recent article that you were working on. And I'm wondering if you want to share a little bit about kind of what came up for you in that writing process and what you had shared with me around thinking about this theme of equality. And
Yeah, it's a big topic. I've been working on a piece that's going to publish in a few weeks that I was asked to write, which is uncommon. Usually I pick my topics and I go to my editors or pitch something. But one of my editors came to me and asked me to write about Sean Sherman, who many of you know is an Indigenous chef here who just won a James Beard Award. He won that James Beard Award between the time that I interviewed him and the time I was writing the piece. And so he has a big spotlight on him now. And that's wonderful for the Indigenous food community, which is growing. But when I wrote the article, I didn't just want to focus on one person, and I spent a lot of time speaking to people who work for him, because I've learned through Rick and through other people that we need to pay attention to how people treat their employees and treat people around them. I made sure to speak to women, not just people who've been in the spotlight, to food foragers and seed keepers, and that was a really eye-opening process for me to hear about. Food sovereignty itself is a huge topic about what it means to have control over what you eat, historically and even today when we're talking about food deserts and who has access to quality food. There's a lot to be said about the process of writing it, but also the topic. And it's not something that I take lightly. I take it really seriously, and I make sure that I'm not overlooking and having blind spots to things that might not be easy to talk about.
thanks for that. Did that bring up anything for you? Otherwise, I have another question too.
You can go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I'm curious about, as you think about the passion areas that you both have, the work that you do, how do you understand how your faith connects with this or just the way you approach conversations around food and hospitality?
We were discussing at our table, actually, some of the questions and how, it's the idea of equality is really easy. Love others as you love yourself. It's pretty easy, but especially in kitchens, there's a lot of bias, and there's a lot of inequality that goes on. We were just having a discussion this morning how often in kitchens it's so standardly hierarchical that the people who end up doing the most work are always on the bottom rung, and they get paid the least and they get the least respect. So part of how that interacts with faith, to kind of wrap that around, is the Jesus story of who does Jesus appeal to, and those are the people on the bottom for the most part.
I just lost what I was going to say. And then so Rick and I want to start a restaurant. Some of you know that. And so it's in our business plan to make sure that we don't have those really hierarchical systems. Of course, there has to be a certain amount of leadership, but we want to make sure that everybody who eventually, hopefully one day works for us, gets to have their voices heard and doesn't get pigeonholed and has an opportunity to learn different things and not be kind of stuck in one role as traditional kitchens usually have been. And I know that's really important to you.
Yeah, actually dovetailing on that, I come from a couple different kitchens that are very collaborative, where when it comes to plating and creating dishes, the entire team works on it. It's not just the chef who's this is my vision, this is what we're making. It's everyone's input gets to go into the dish. And I think that that's a really important way to create food for people.
Now, one of the things, thanks for that, both of you. One of the things we had also talked about, and thinking about this passage is sometimes, because it talks about in the list in James, how it's like, oh, well, hey, but I don't murder anybody, so basically I'm better than you. And also we're not going to talk about adultery or anything. And sometimes the ways where we say, like, this matters to faith, but this doesn't. And we had the conversation just as we talked about food sovereignty and about food and hospitality and the work that you do around how this stuff is like, we should care about this as Christians, like thinking about where food comes from, who's involved, et cetera. Do you want to say any more about that and how that connects for you? Or I don't know if that triggers what we had talked about at all. And it's fine if it doesn't.
No, it does.
Because then I'll just say random things like that.
It does, because I think we were talking about like the basic human needs, like shelter and food. We all got to eat, and we all need a roof over our heads. And it's wild to me when food gets like politicized and certain people are excluded from something as common or something as necessary as just eating food and being able to sustain yourself.
And I think we talked a little bit about food being kind of an equalizer because everybody has to have, food and a similar experience. Just on Friday, the day that we spoke, we were preparing for 2 different dinners at the same time. We were cooking. Last night we did a dinner for a very, person in a very wealthy community who'd had our food before. We did multiple courses, and we were also cooking at the same time for a friend of ours who's pretty under-resourced and just had a death in her family, and we brought the meal out to her, and they both expressed an equal amount of gratitude, and we put, effort and care into both meals, but the need that we were filling was a totally separate need, and neither one is more valid than the other. But I think those are the experiences where the passage talks about, someone walking in and looking really nice and someone being obviously poor and treating them the same, and that is really important to us.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Any other thoughts that you would want to share in terms of hospitality, food, et cetera, invitations you want to share with our community?
Maybe. My brain's kind of going slow, yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
We did just cook a big dinner.
Yeah, we're a little. One thing that we've really enjoyed over the years, and this would only have happened because we were invited to do these sorts of events, is a few years ago, a friend of ours over at Normandale Church asked us to be an auction item, like to do a dinner as an auction item for a mental health charity. And we did that. It was about 6 or 8 people. And someone donated the food, and then we donated our labor. And we've since done that a few times. We did a dinner to benefit Ukraine. A few folks in the room were there. And we've done other dinners too where we kind of get to put our efforts together with someone else and be of benefit. And the quality of food, we try to, present our best in that situation, but also we're so grateful for the people who come and make those things possible, who give their home or who donate the food cost. And that's been really special. Some of our favorite food memories are doing those things.
Yeah, one thing too, like I've been dabbling in the beer world a lot lately, and in the craft beer world, there's a big volunteer angle to it. A lot of breweries have these like volunteer groups, and restaurants don't really have that. Usually what restaurants do is they put on a benefit dinner. They invite people with deep pockets to come and spend a lot of money and donate a lot of money, and that's fantastic. But something else that we've talked about in our business is how can our restaurant, whenever it opens, also have a volunteer organization that is doing actual good work in the community instead of just like a one-off dinner every few months. So that's something that we're going deeper into as well.
Thank you. The last question that I have is thinking about hospitality and the Airbnb experience as well. What have you learned through opening your home?
I'll start this one. We do, for context, we do Airbnb the very traditional way in the sense that the guests will have a room, an office, and a private bathroom inside our home. So we interact with guests, which a lot of them aren't that way right now. A lot of them, it's like a private thing. You never see the hosts ever. So what we've learned is like people travel for a lot of different reasons. Some people are traveling just for fun, and that's great. Some people are traveling for weddings. Some people are traveling for funerals. During 2020, we actually ended up hosting a lot of people who were relocating because staying a month in an Airbnb was cheaper than rent. So that's a very sobering thing to learn, first of all. But going along that way, what we try to do is just provide as comfortable an experience for anyone, no matter what their situation is coming through our home. Yeah. If you want to go further.
Yeah, and just the idea that they show up and all we know is, we have a picture and we know the dates they're going to be there and we know where they're from, and they may tell us why they're coming, but just having those open doors for everybody. We've had we've made friends now that we still are connected with, and we've had guests stay internationally. We had a family stay with us who had never been out of Africa before, and we had to, it was just very interesting to teach them how to use a microwave and how to lock a door, and those are just things that experiences we would never have if we didn't have just that open arm mentality. Airbnb is a business, so it's not, I don't want to make it sound like we're hosting people for free. There is a cost associated with it, but I think we try to keep it to a reasonable level, and we try to provide amenities and comfort for people. And it is interesting to know, like you said, why people travel. Sometimes we have people come and they're reconnecting with family members that they're, nervous about meeting, and so you kind of get those stories in the evenings when you interact with people, and it's really it kind of comes full circle sometimes when you hear people's stories like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. So I invite you, if you want to hear more, obviously you can talk to them as real humans in the daily life. Also at Theology on Tap, every so often you get some really awesome tidbits of learning that will be shared with you, such as that, do you know that hops and beer was actually started by women? Just so you know, fun fact. That's what I learned at the last Theology on Tap. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your story with us, and really appreciate you both doing that. So let's give them a hand as a thank you. Andrew.
Just full transparency, as I watched Rick up here, and he's tired, and the gears are going a little bit slower. I'm with you, man. I feel a little slower this morning. Some of us saw Brandy Carlisle last night at the Excel, so that's not a brag. That's just transparency. That's why. But it was really great. So those intro questions, for the folks who did see them, we like to start our mornings a little bit slower and talk to each other about the theme, faith and equality. And usually it's questions like, what do you like to do in the summer? Talk to your neighbor. And it's like these softballs. And this morning was like, what are your biases and why do you have them? And think about it and share. And so the reason we do that, again, is just to be reflective, to help to challenge one another, share with one another. And so for this breathe out, I do want to kind of continue that trajectory. When we talk about faith and equality, again, I think Rick mentioned this. It's just like, on the surface, we're all like, yeah, I'm for that. I'm for equality. We should treat people the same. But it's just so much more complicated than that. We can compare equality to equity. And what's the difference between treating people the same and treating people in a way that's fair? That's the next layer, right? And I think that's something that we don't want to always acknowledge, but we do in a way know it's true. Like just the other day, my family went to this festival at Pearl Park, and there were these carnival games for the kiddos, like ring toss and stuff like that. And they have lines on the ground. And it's like, if you are younger than 3, stand behind this line. If you're 3 to 5, stand behind this line. And 7+, they had different lines. It wasn't every kid stands behind the same line and be treated the same. It was, well, what's fair based on their ability. In our verse this morning from James 2, again, talking about how we might treat people differently, I think that's what's important. It's like we recognize maybe we should treat people differently because of who they are, right? And maybe their situation, maybe their personality, maybe their background, and not treat people differently because we think we're better or they're worse or what have you, right? I think one of the verses is, here's the deal, the things that we think make us better than one another, they don't. All of us are broken and imperfect. So I think it's about where we put the sameness. Maybe it's not sameness in behavior, but just sameness in our humanity, and maybe our sameness in our situation and God's love for us. And so I guess to start, that's one of my challenges for us, is how do we apply what we think about faith and equality, right? Because we have our spheres of influence. Being a father of three, this is something I say a few times, like, love one another. I love my children, and they're all very different. So my love for them doesn't look the same. Maybe one of my kids really likes spending time with me. Maybe one of my kids needs those words of affirmation, what have you, all the different love languages. Same for all of us. How do we treat the people in our circles? We might love or care for them in a similar way, but it might look different. And then expanding. I know we have hopes for society. We look around and not everything is equitable or equal. And we don't have a ton of individual ability to change that. But I did find this quote from John Rawls. He's a political philosopher. And he said, a just society is a society that if you knew everything about it, you'd be willing to enter it in a random place because you trusted your ability to navigate, and it would be fair, it would be equitable. So that's kind of big picture. I know we can't change everything in society, but we're all here at Meeting House Church, right? And one of the ways we are trying to be equitable or fair is try to understand people's situations, their context, their stories. And in a big way, that's why this service exists. That's why this service, being contemplative, being reflective, naming the human experience, leaning into mental health and justice issues and what have you. A lot of folks have barriers to wanting to engage with the church, or barriers in their understanding of who God is. So we're trying to create space for that. Trying to remove those barriers so that people can know who they are in the eyes of God. So my question, with all that kind of backdrop, we'll make it simple, is just, what does a just society or a just church or a just community look like to you? And my encouragement is to focus on this place particularly. So take a few minutes to do that.
sick. Oh, hallelujah. To hell, hallelujah. Storytelling man, I can't find him in the church. He walked out the door, took off his sandals, and shook off all the dirt. Hallelujah.
All right, announcement time. Folks watching at home, we always like to make that experience better. So there is an online survey we ask you to take. It's just in the description of the video. And actually, folks in this room, if you've ever watched church online, you can, the circle, the coaster thing, please don't use it as a coaster, but the thing that looks like a coaster. For some of you, if you just hold up your QR code reader, that'll work. For some of you, I don't know which phones this works for. If you just hold it up, it'll pull up the link. It's high tech. I don't get it. Next Sunday we have our next courtyard service. If you participated last one or the one before, we've had some beautiful weather for them, but we're just out in the courtyard. The timing works really well. Like the bell tower blocks out the sun for a good while, so we're just in the shade. But that's a joint service, so folks in here, folks in the traditional service will be together. And then today at 11 o'clock, we have a town hall meeting in the meeting house. Essentially, I think we're giving an overview of what we've been up to, what we hope to be doing. I think overall we're hoping to do more of these because we are kind of starting a new chapter, right? In lieu of being on the tail end of the pandemic, probably, hopefully. having these 2 services, new name, all that. So the work's not over, and we want to dream, and we want to dream together. So we'll have these town hall meetings to just hear from one another and think about what we can accomplish as a community. So that is one way to engage. And then, as always, with giving. A lot of ways to engage. You can come help out with the kiddos. I know George and the children's ministry are looking for volunteers. If you want to help out Leah, Nicole with the youth ministry, help out in small groups, help out Sunday mornings. A lot of ways to be generous with your time. And obviously a very important way to help out and engage is financial giving. So if you wanted to do that, we have so many ways that you can just imagine. Like, all the ways I can give financially. Online with an actual check, you could text it. I'm sure there's other ways too. Again, use your imagination. Yeah, and so with that said, hope to see you next week at the courtyard service, and have a wonderful week. Happy to be here with you guys. Thanks.
Gonna sit at the welcome gate. Also, what you
that shirt though, man. Really. Where'd you get that? Yeah. I feel that. It looked like something your girl would get you too. Like I want him to wear this. Nah, it's cool, bro. I like that. I like floral T-shirts. Yeah. You know? If I find out, I'll text you. I don't know. Yeah. No, I do like them. I do like them.